Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Vertical Reach podcast. This is where storytelling meets strategy. I'm Pauline Gray, and each week I sit down with the creators, innovators, and voices shaping the world of vertical storytelling. Let's tell stories that connect. Hello, everyone. We're back with our current episode of the Vertical Reach. The Vertical Reach is the moment you decide to extend upward, physically, professionally, emotionally, in your relationships. When you want to meet what exists above you, where you are right now, when staying at the same level is no longer enough. The vertical reach is the act of rising to meet what's higher to the occasion in front of you, whether it's with your body, your work, or your ambition. The podcast is about people who didn't just pivot careers, they changed altitude. They took off. This season focuses on filmmakers and creators entering the vertical microdrama space, or, as in the case of today's guest, well-established in the vertical microdrama space who enter the space as part of a larger integration or reinvention of themselves. The goal is to document real-time transitions, not some polished hindsight where we can do a sort of a autobiography. It's more of a documentary. And the guest here today, we have vertical microdrama powerhouse, Rachel Zilberg.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello.
Rachel Zilberg is the lead writer at Shorts, the platform where she develops and oversees original vertical drama series alongside a global team. I believe the main guys are based in Paris?
I don't know that I think it's Bordeaux actually where the office is, but in
Bordeaux.
France, yes.
In France, okay. Where the wine comes from. Some of the wine.
Exactly. I'm sure that's what they do at the office all day, obviously.
Oh, yeah. That's France. With a background in interactive storytelling, video game writing, and romance-driven content, Rachel has led the creation of dozens of vertical series and helped shape the evolving language of the format. She's definitely one of the founding, I'd say, founders, founding parents, founding fathers, founding mothers, founders of the format. She evolved into verticals from the gaming space. In the gaming space, her video game credits include, as a writer, High School Story Class Act, Mismatch, Love Hacks, and various other choices projects. As head of narrative, she was at Love Sparks by Swag Masha and Tap Story by New Reading, the parent company of Good Novel and Good Short. So right now would be a good moment before we go into her numerous dozens of vertical credits to maybe have a little moment to kind of illuminate a bit on the gaming space, the kind of games you wrote, the choices model, and that going to set a sort of a backstory to what led you into the vertical space. So tell us a little about what got you started in the gaming space and the first appeals and how you landed in that area to begin with.
So I knew that I wanted to work as a creative writer since I was a little kid. And I became certain that I wanted to pursue this path when I was in university. I had considered the more standard practical career path, whatever on earth that means, numerous times. And I had essentially realized there's no such thing anymore in a lot of ways. I was seeing all of my peers either go into tech or have perhaps future academic careers, or else it didn't really seem like there was a clear path forward. So I looked back to my old dreams, and I was not a gamer, but I was introduced to the genre of narrative gaming, and I fell absolutely in love with it very quickly. And as I was nearing graduation and I realized, wow, I need to get an internship, I need to get a job, I need to figure my life out at the tender age of 21, I met the Choices team at a job fair, made friends with them, and they took me onto the team. So for those of you not familiar with the model of this game, it's called Choices, Stories You Play, and it's mobile-based. It's somewhat similar to Verticals, or this current iteration of Verticals, I suppose, because Verticals are growing, changing so much genre-wise. Very romance-focused stories, bite-sized content, emphasis on hooks and cliffhangers, and keeping audiences invested in a really, really small space. You as a player play an avatar of a character, and you make choices within the narrative that progress the story, whether those choices are related to your love interest or to the broader plot, or even to the aesthetics of your character customization, like hairstyles, outfits, etc.
You're saying you can decide my avatar is a curly redhead in a pink suit, choosing to have a romantic relationship with the character in the game, or is the game interactive in the sense of someone else maybe in Portugal is playing the role of that male, or how does that kind of sync up?
Yeah, so definitely you're only dating fictional characters that are written into the game. In terms of the avatar creation, it wasn't endless customization. We had a fantastic art team that would create these beautiful, beautiful assets. So on your character page, you would have, let's say, 4 hairstyles to choose from, 4 skin colors to choose from, a series of outfits to choose from. One of the things we would upsell people on in terms of paying in-game currency would be like if you wanted a fancier hairstyle in a really cool color, or maybe that pink suit would be a little cooler than all the other outfits. And then a lot of our writing was designing these love interests within the story to be really compelling and to be very distinct types that people would be interested in. Some games would only have one love interest, some games would have multiple love interests you could choose from. I hope that mostly answers your question.
That's amazing. I want multiple love interests to choose from. Just so you know, I'm in for that. I gotta have options. Okay. So it brings us squarely to about, I'm guessing, about 3 years ago.
A little more, actually. I think it was 2020 when I was affected by the layoffs at Pixelberry Studios, which is the company behind Choices, which was devastating because I was still quite early in my career and the pandemic had just hit. And that was when that was actually when I connected with Swagmasha and was the head of narrative for them for a little bit, after which I landed at New Reading working on a game. And that game barely saw the light of day because that really quickly turned into Good Short at the start of the American vertical drama boom.
Wow. So here you are, like the rest of the world, in quarantine, I imagine.
Yeah,
In
so the
quarantine.
vertical stuff happened like in 2022, 2023, I want to say, so past quarantine. But God, when did I start working on the game with them? I think that was also somewhat past. But yeah, the layoffs at Pixelberry happened right near the start of quarantine, or maybe the middle, and that was definitely a rough couple of things to be happening at the same time. After layoffs at Pixelberry Studios, I was fumbling around trying to figure out what on earth to do next. And the lovely people at Swagmasha reached out to me. They are a mobile gaming and entertainment company. They were working on a game called Love Sparks that was essentially interactive fake Tinder, where you would swipe through different fictional love interests and then you could start texting them and you would get into these stories with them through these texts. And there could also be scenes where you would go away from the text interface to have dates with the character, and it would be more like a choices style format game at that point. And they were right at the start of developing this game and they needed a head of narrative. They had a few scripts and a few love interests, but for the most part, they weren't writers. They were project leads, tech guys, art people, etc. So I came on to build the writing team and help oversee the tone of the game. And unfortunately, it was going great. And I was building this amazing team and I was the head of a department for the first time in my life. And then all of a sudden, there was the start of the war in Ukraine. And the reason that this impacted the company was because the company had people from Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia all working on the project. So, of course, international panic ensued because things were really, really difficult. I suddenly didn't hear from my team for quite a while. And then I found out that the project was unfortunately being put on hold and I had to go find something else to do.
That is such a collision of like the fate.
Right? No, I mean, I remember when I was not hearing from my supervisors for a while, I had to make a choice for almost a month, I want to say, of I've got like these 5 writers under me. Do we keep working? Do we soldier on? And I figured like at that point, the answer was obviously yes, because there was a war happening. And I was assuming that the core team was really struggling to figure out what to do. And they were, holding down the fort however they could. And I'll never know exactly what was going on, in the physical office, but we just powered through and I had to keep a hold on the reins and keep things going while there was complete chaos and complete unknown.
Wow. Okay. So we can honestly say then that your leadership skills were honed in fire.
I would say I did my best.
Yeah, you're definitely a strong team leader. So now, good to hear all this. So here you are in sort of communication blackout. Whole world doesn't quite know what's about to happen next. And we emerged from a pandemic pretty much into a war. And in between the time, verticals slipped in there as a medium, as a format. For some of us, like myself, who are learning more, always educating about the format, verticals and microdramas started in China during the pandemic and now become a global phenomenon. But the pandemic and that period in history almost became the birthing place for the format. So I'm curious now, because I'm about to share some of your most recent vertical titles, and Rachel has dozens. I want to hear more about that journey from the games into verticals and how you navigated that very tricky war zone, literally, space. So some of her vertical titles are on the Shorts platform where she currently works. The first one, which I'm kind of curious about why this is a scandalous, it's Forbidden Attraction to the Billionaire.
Well, that was our very, very first one.
Yeah, but why is that forbidden?
Because he's her boss, because he hires her to be his personal assistant, and then she falls in love with him, and also he's engaged at the time, so he's forbidden on a lot of levels.
So he happens to be her boss, but he's a
How is he?
billionaire.
Well, yeah, so he's a billionaire, he runs this company, and he needs a personal assistant to help him with odds and ends around the house. And so he hires her, and she moves into his giant sprawling mansion, and it's a dream come true. And unfortunately, she realizes pretty quickly off the bat that not only is he engaged, but his fiance is a horrible, horrible person who is very jealous at the sight of a woman entering the home, even if she's only there in a professional capacity. And of course, it gets worse when it becomes clear that this man is starting to fall for his new hire, and she's starting to fall for him right back.
Ooh, okay.
Right?
Now,
Yeah, it was good.
and let's move on to the next scandalous title, Pregnant by My Brother-in-Law. You want to give us a teaser on that?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, man. So that one was about a young model who was trying to make it in the fashion world. This time she was the one engaged, and her fiance was the one who was a horrible person. And her brother-in-law has had the eyes for her for many, many years, and he's watched his brother treat her horribly, and he's wanted to step in and save her, but he's stopped himself every single time. But then finally, fiance cheats on her the night before the wedding, and she runs into the brother-in-law in a bar, and she's completely heartbroken, and she wants revenge on her fiance who has broken her heart. So she decides to sleep with his brother, and she promises him that night that her fiance is dead to her. So he thinks, okay, well, they're going to break up. Maybe this isn't the end of the world. They're also probably both a little tipsy, so whatever. Then, of course, the next morning, though, she decides to go through with the original marriage, and drama ensues.
Okay, so I'm assuming that right now we're at the paywall because I want to know more.
I don't
Okay.
actually remember where we put the paywall, but I think it was around there. So I'm glad it worked.
This sounds about right. Yeah, I love it. Another one, Escaping My Ex-Husband.
I feel like we named that one poorly. That was when I was first starting to help come up with titles. Honestly, like I would have titled a lot of these differently with what I know now. At the time, I'm sure a lot of writers have probably talked to you about the struggle of, you come up with a title that feels just objectively interesting and cool, but then you have to come up with a clickbait title. And sometimes, a lot of the time, it's the company that comes up with the clickbait title. But because Shorts is such a small team, it's me. Hi, I'm the company. Well, that's not true. I mean, like the project, the core team is like 5 of us total in terms of the people who are in-house. And so we're all working together really closely. And I like to think I'm terrible at coming up with titles, but it's my job, so I got to do it. So in terms of Escaping My Ex-Husband, I should have titled it so that it was clear that it was a second chance love story, and also a bit of a mafia story. And I don't think any of that came across in the title. So I do kick myself for that a little bit. But going back in time, man, that was a while ago. That one was about, let's see, a young woman who was dying of an illness, and her family was in debt to the mob. And so she was scared for the well-being of her boyfriend. And she essentially figured that because she was dying and she had a limited amount of time to live, that she would promise the remaining years of her life to this mob boss in exchange for the safety of her family and the debt being wiped out and the safety of this boyfriend. And so she had to break up with him, and she had to kind of like become dead to the world, essentially. And he genuinely thought that she was dead, but really she was just trying to protect the people that she loved. Years later, she's survived against all odds. The date the doctor said she was going to die, she made it. And her contract with this mob boss ended because she'd stipulated 7 years, because that's when she thought she was going to kick the bucket. So he has to let her go as per the contract. So he does. And she goes and gets a job, and surprise, her new boss is the man whose heart she broke 7 years ago.
Ooh, I want to know more. Now I want to talk about the hot ticket. If anyone's on LinkedIn, whether you're part of the vertical microchannel algorithm or not, you've seen the hot photo for Keep Your Ring, I'm the President Now. Tell us about this one. That's the hot sizzle of the vertical world as we speak.
Keep Your Ring, I'm President Now is a very exciting experiment over here at Shorts, because it's our very first male POV show. It was written primarily by our fantastic writer, Adrian Trujillo, I was the lead writer on the project. We also had a lot of help from another fantastic writer on the team, Talia. So it really was a big group effort. And essentially, it's about this decorated, brave, handsome military man who has to fake his own death when he goes to war because of a top secret mission. And he's planning to come home to his fiancee, who he's madly in love with. But unfortunately, he comes home to her in bed with his best friend. And, ultimately he has enough. And he leaves her, and she realizes that she really majorly messed up true love, and she spends the show doing everything in her power to get this man back.
Okay. Intriguing. All right. All right. I love it. I love it. Love it. Now that we have an overview now of Rachel's vast experience, fresh out of college, into the gaming world, now real game changer in the vertical microdrama world. So now we're going to go a little deeper, sort of into the more sort of your personal creative journey as someone in the digital creative gaming space, and just kind of track your evolution. So was there a moment when you, Rachel, realized that horizontal growth had capped out for you and you decided to reach higher? Or was it a moment, or is it more of a general sort of like dawning on you?
There were a couple of moments that felt this way for me. The first was in university, before my career had even fully started, when I was a psychology major and I thought that I was maybe going to go the graduate school route and go into clinical psychology and do something a little bit more on the beaten path. And I was doing some student research in a lab, and there were some academic laboratory politics that occurred. I was feeling devastated at this project not going well, and it led into this larger internal snowball feeling of, well, if I don't want to go to graduate school, if I don't want to deal with academic politics. And I also had attempted minoring in computer science to see if I liked coding, because that seemed to be also the main career path. And I didn't seem to like that very much either. So I was panicking a little bit. And I sat down with my dad, who I really deeply trust. He's a clinical psychologist, so he had done the full academic route, got his PhD, and he knew exactly what I'd gone through because he had gone through a lot of similar things. And he said, well, would you rather go down this path, go into debt for grad school, not do the actual clinical work that would really appeal to you for a very long time? Or would you rather have that money, get a house? I laugh at this because who can have a house in this economy? But otherwise, his points rang very true. And it was at that moment that I realized, well, the thing I've wanted to do my entire life was be a creative person. And I was having trouble finding examples of people around me who had done that. And
Mhm.
I had to become my own example because it seemed to me like the only path forward in my own personal and professional fulfillment.
I so hear you because from a personal perspective, I actually have my master's degree in political economy. And so there I was at the London School of Economics in London, getting this great degree. And then I had another year of funding. And I said, you know what? Let me go film school. Went to film school. And what struck me at that point, I was much in a very different headspace, but I never liked politics.
So what were you doing on that path to start with?
Well, sort of tweak that. I love political science. I hate politics. In terms of studying human beings, power dynamics, and how people interact in different structured ways, and hierarchies and authorities and submissive, all that stuff, I love watching that stuff. I love watching the game. I cannot play it. I am not equipped
I
for
think it
any of
takes a
that.
rare kind of person. So it sounds like you also found yourself in a position where you realized that the path that you were on was not the right path for you. It sounds like you were in a really similar position of having this aha moment that the path that you had dedicated your time to also wasn't quite right for you.
Exactly, because I'm someone who, while I love political science, I hate politics. Outside looking in, seeing how power dynamics and hierarchies function, how relationships work, I love it. Even if I go to like a fish store and there's this one fish you can buy, it's a blue fish, usually blue, and it has to be in the tank alone. It's actually not that big. It's a tiny, tiny fish. And there are other bigger goldfish that are terrified of it. And I forget what it's called, this little blue fish, but they always say never put that fish in the tank with other fish. But I can sit there for hours watching this little fish claim its territory. But
Kind of like
me,
people.
exactly, exactly. It exists throughout every the animal kingdom ever in the world. Two amoebas are fighting somewhere along the line, right? But I personally, while I love political science, I can't stand politics. I'm not cut out for that world. My soul, my core, I don't fit into it. It doesn't work. My happy world is in a cave with a story that I'm typing.
I relate deeply. I mean, I also
Right,
really enjoy
right?
the yeah, I like working in teams, but, like, political webs are not fun and having to play that game, and I think that it's somewhat inevitable. In any industry you're in, there is a political game, and you have to learn to play it or you will be in trouble, but I think there are some industries that have slightly higher difficulty on that game than others.
Absolutely. And to your point, I would argue that academia is probably one of the most competitive ones.
Yeah, and I didn't want that life ultimately. Like you, I was really interested in the theory of everything, you know? I was really enjoying studying the human mind and human behavior, um, and I felt passionate about the idea of helping people. But when I realized that a lot of the journey that would stand in the way between me reading a textbook and me helping people was that I would have to weather these politics, I wasn't sure that that was what I wanted for myself, and I wasn't sure that I was willing to pay that price of my soul.
Exactly. So now tell me, so you have your academia, your background in psychology, then you have your sort of intro into the gaming world, then you have that leading to the vertical space. What has been sort of the red thread between the three of all those different things? What's really carried through from all your previous work now into verticals?
So when people hear that I studied psychology, they immediately say to me, well, that must mean that you use your psychology background when you're writing characters. And while that's true to an extent, what my psychology background really helps me with is understanding the humans that I'm selling these characters to and trying to figure out audience behavior, how audiences and readers or whatever sort of person that I'm trying to reach, how to best reach them, how to best keep them engaged. So I'd like to give an example of a psychological theory that relates to verticals. This is one that has made its way so fully into the popular culture zeitgeist that I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. I'm sure you've heard of sunk cost fallacy. The idea that when you put a lot of your time and your resources into a particular goal, that even if the continuing with this goal might not ultimately be in your best interest or might not be the most rewarding thing for your own future, you feel that because you have already put so much into it that you can't give it up. So this is a concept that clearly applies to me in a lot of vertical marketing strategies. While Shorts tends to go for more the viral moment marketing where our ads are shorter and we focus more on a little moment that will intrigue you. And our trailers are a little bit more traditional. A lot of other vertical companies will bring you in by giving you a bunch of episodes for free in a Facebook ad. I'm sure you've probably seen this, you know, where you'll be scrolling and then suddenly in your reels you'll get like a 10-minute clip of this story and you get sucked in because you've already put so much time into this and you've already spent the 10 minutes. You think, well, man, now I've got to see it through. So, you know, this is an example of how you can think about theories of human behavior in order. And I'm not saying that downloading the app would be a waste of your time or a bad thing for your future, but because I'm sure you would have a great time and it would be a great story. But the time that you have already spent engaging in this thing because it's been given to you for free, because it's already hooked you repeatedly, does make you more likely to then be willing to spend money because, oh, I've already come this far. I've got to keep going.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. That's such an amazing principle because sure there are plenty of marriages that
Hmm.
have lasted a lot longer. They might have even because of the sunk cost of being
It is true.
which applies to many things. So I'm curious, what surprised you most about vertical storytelling?
It was learning about Chinese tropes. So when I was over at New Reading and we had stopped working on the game that we were writing and we went to go start Good Short, I was given all of these outlines to work from to write vertical scripts, and my job was basically localization. And I was given these story beats that were adapted from Chinese-based web novels that had been translated into English, and I was told, make this something that an American audience would consume. And seeing some of these tropes, I felt like I was learning a whole new type of storytelling, which was extremely cool to me because I felt like I was learning something new culturally and also artistically. So, for instance, an example that I like to give on this front is the idea of there being family loyalty related to business ventures, and then arranged marriages being a distinct part of running a business, which I think exists somewhat in American media, but a lot less, and certainly not in the same way. And if you've watched a lot of verticals, you may know sort of the difference of what I'm talking about. But that was something like I didn't know how to write it because it was new. And so I had the opportunity not only to spend a lot of time researching these new ideas, but also to hear from extremely talented Chinese writers and creatives on the team how to best accomplish this type of storytelling. And I had to get really humble because while I like to think I'm really good at leaving my ego at the door, I learned that pretty early on in my games career that in order to create something great, you can't take full ownership over it. You have to, listen to others, and you have to like not put your entire ego into the project or feel like it's life or death. And you have to put your audience first and your deadlines first, etc. There was a part of me that had these deep storytelling instincts of what would work for an American audience that made me want to push back. And I can't think of a specific example right now, but it was a really good exercise in feeling like a beginner again, which was ultimately really valuable to me.
Interesting, because I can imagine that coming from that academic seeker of knowledge, wanting to learn, that kind of met a need for you as well.
It did, but there were also times in the beginning that were extremely frustrating because I would be writing and I would be told repeatedly, this is wrong, this isn't working, you're not doing it right. And I had felt that over my multiple years as a game writer that I had figured out a thing or two about how to tell a story. And obviously I knew I wasn't an expert, there's always more to learn, but there was a part of me that was frustrated and thought, why am I not getting this? And it wasn't until I internalized I have to learn totally different tools here. So yeah, when I finally figured that out and really internalized that that was what I had to do, then it became extremely exciting.
And I ask you, based on my own window as well, how much of that trope learning, writing, retooling was a cultural adjustment or cultural integration as well?
It was a massive one. Previously, I'd worked on products that were very, very Western centric, and I had a very particular set of instincts going in, and I have developed a really strong appreciation and deep, deep respect for Chinese storytelling in terms of they're so good at melodrama, right? Like, I mean, we've got our soap operas and, we're good at drama too, but there's a particular sense of deep emotional stakes that I
Good.
feel I learned in my early career because, I hadn't been super into C dramas or K dramas, and I knew they were big in popular culture, but I hadn't quite gotten into them. And this gave me an opportunity to really learn from types of international storytelling and practices. And honestly, because like human ways of thinking influence how we tell stories. So just being able to connect with all these incredible, mostly Chinese writers who have these great ideas has really helped me grow as a storyteller and as a professional creative.
So get that because I mean, my own personal experience, I studied Japanese for a long time in high school and college. And I was always amazed, not that I'm not saying all Asian cultures are the same. I'm getting there. But I was always amazed by how hard it is to just say no. A lot of Asian cultures. Or like I have my best friend since I was 16 is Chinese. And we always laugh because, for example, I found out, not sure it's from her, that the Chinese language, there's no word for privacy.
I didn't know that.
There's no word. For America, it's like laws are built upon privacy. Most of the Constitution is about your privacy. There's not even the concept to create a word meaning privacy in the language. And so my girlfriend and I would chat because I was with her mom. We were with her mom. And we were at somewhere. I know it's pretty cold. I thought it was cold. And my car was really nearby. And I said, should I go get your mom? Should I go get your mom a jacket for my car? She asked her mom. Mom says no. And I said, what kind of no was that?
Mm.
Which no was that no? Was that
Was
no?
that polite? Was that like, oh, I have to say no because I need to be polite, but
Yeah.
secretly?
Yeah. Which no was that? And I was like, is that the no that means I'm freezing to death, but I really can't just take the first offer? So over now in the course of our friendship, we can joke about what a no means, what a yes means. But yeah, I can only imagine now as an artist now, you're generating content for a global marketplace, at the very least, a billion people in a culture. And you're coming from, I guess, California, leading a team that's global. For lack of a better terminology, each culture says no in a different way. So how did you kind of navigate the subtleties of that sort of intercultural communication?
It's been a learning process, and one that I'm super grateful to have been thrust into in the way my career has shaken out. Even when I first started working for Swag Masha, my Belarusian and Ukrainian and Russian colleagues communicated in a much more blunt way than I was used to, which was, again, was something I had to adjust to, right? Because that was the culture for them of like swearing during meetings sometimes and saying things in a very straightforward, matter of fact way, which honestly I loved dearly. But there was a culture shock. Similarly, when I've worked for Chinese companies, there's been a deep degree of politeness and kindness in the conversation that is the complete opposite of that. Once again, you have to learn to adjust your own communication style to your professional environment. And you can imagine that while there are different communication styles at various companies, that suddenly when you're bringing in, well, how does a culture communicate in terms of a whole country or a whole small set of countries in a geographical location, you do have to learn to adjust. With the shorts team, I find that with AJ, so my two bosses are AJ and Sylvain, and they both live in France. And AJ grew up in, I believe, New York. So he's still pretty Americanized, even though he also, speaks French. So he does both. And then with Sylvain, sometimes because we have a little more of a language barrier, super smart guy, like incredibly hard worker. But that's definitely the case where I'm learning, okay, well, how do an American and a Frenchman communicate? And I think sometimes we're still figuring it out, even though we have a really strong working relationship. So it's just, and even in terms of the members of my own team, I've got people from all over the world who write. And when it comes to individuals, I try to treat it less as a culture. I mean, the cultural differences matter, right? Like you have to be aware of the context that someone comes from when you're working with them and getting to know them. So for instance, sometimes when I'm working with writers who live in China, back to your point about there are a million different ways to say no. Occasionally, people will be less willing to be forthright with their honest opinions about things. And so I have to learn how to tease out enough trust that someone can be really blunt with me because it's important to the creative process and to me personally that someone I work with as a writer is able to tell me their truest feelings on a topic and not sugarcoat it and give me their instincts, regardless of whether it's at total odds with what I might think. And, someone who's grown up in Los Angeles versus someone who's grown up in Beijing may have different levels of difficulty with that. So as a manager, I've certainly had to think about, okay, well, how does someone's context influence their work style and their communication style? And how can I best figure out how that person says no?
I love that. So let me ask you this. In the world in which we all know horizontal growth, we're doing more along the same ceiling, more activity, more projects, more sales, more achievements at the same level. Whereas the vertical reach, we need to make fewer moves, but achieve higher leverage. So horizontal growth, you're on the court, you're dribbling back and forth, right? But you're going back and forth along the court. The vertical reach now, you get the rebound. Does that make sense, anyone? You get the rebound. You may make boom, boom, fewer moves, and you go for the dunk, right? So that's when you actually score, when you're really considered a player, right? In that context, how would you personally define success differently now? Or from a zoom out perspective, do you think society is defining success differently? And this vertical phenomenon is indicative of a different definition of success. So just your thoughts.
I think that the traditional view of success, of being that you stay in one job and slowly move up over time, has become a little bit culturally obsolete in a lot of fields. I find that a lot of my peers, people around me, are often pivoting almost every 2 years to a different job. And oftentimes, while that growth can be somewhat vertical, it feels pretty horizontal, where, yeah, maybe you're moving up in the level of what you do somewhat, but there's also a sense of constantly grasping for stability. And that was a thing that I used to think was unique to the artist's path. That one thing I did have to accept really early on about seeking success as a creative person was that it did somewhat lock the door of traditional corporate growth. I was going to be having a different job every few years. I was going to have to learn a new environment. I was going to have to become a jack of all trades in terms of the different skill sets that I had. And there was a level of stress that came with that, even though I decided that it was worth it because my model of success for myself is about a core sense of fulfillment. And while it may be a more difficult path to be jumping around a ton, doing creative things every day make me happy and make me feel good about the way I'm living my life. In terms of vertical dramas, I got really, really lucky falling into this at the time that I did, because that slam dunk happened in a way, it felt almost overnight, where one day I was struggling to figure out how vertical storytelling worked over a good short, and the next minute I suddenly had these opportunities to do projects with other companies, and particularly with shorts, where I got to build out an entire team in a completely new medium to Americans. And suddenly I'm getting to sit on podcasts with lovely people like yourself, and I'm getting to speak at conferences like the LA Vertical Drama Market. Now that I'm in the vertical space, regardless of where I'm working, I feel that I want to stay deep in this niche for as long as I possibly can. And as long as the vertical niche remains something that the viewers and the general culture is interested in. It feels really cool to be able to go deeply, somewhat of, I mean, not an expert, but to try to attain expertise, which is a constant journey. So it feels good to be here.
I love it. And I would say you are definitely an expert in a constantly evolving field, and your expertise is tracking along with uh, as what I'm observing, as the industry is growing, you're growing along with it.
You have to. I mean, it's the only way to stay here.
Exactly, exactly. And for myself, this whole jack of all trades thing jumped out at me because that is sort of my default state of life, to be a jack of all trades. And I was warned very early on not to become one. And I feel like finally now, jacks of all trades are having their moment. And I'm one of them because for most of my career or just life, I was warned against being a jack of all trades. That was like the worst choice you make in your life. And now I'm seeing that jackies of all trades are really coming of age because I don't know if the whole jack of all trades phenomena is even relevant to artists. Is there a way to not be a jack of all trades if you're an artist? I know plenty of artists who are amazing violinists and also amazing painters. Are they somehow, betraying the rule of success by fulfilling their potential in so many ways? Interesting. Also, when you think about it, I mean, Da Vinci, jack of all trades.
So true.
No way
You know,
around it.
people say jack of all trades, master of none, but when I think of a jack of all trades, I think of someone who's really good at learning on their feet. And I think it's cool to have multiple interests, especially as an artist, because we think big, we're ambitious, we get excited by things. That's a strength. And in order to succeed in the vertical space, and I think broadly as a creative person, you have to learn to adapt to whatever opportunity is thrown your way. And oftentimes that means learning an entire new skill set in a very short period of time and being able to deliver on it. So then, yeah, then that jack of all trades mindset comes in, and you ignite your curiosity and you learn something new. And maybe you don't become a total expert at it, but honestly, what is an expert to start with? But like, in vertical, you can't just be, I mean, you can just be a writer, but ideally you want to be a writer, but you also want to understand how marketing works, because since verticals are often also their own advertisements, you have to understand how to write a story that is also an advertisement. So then you have to learn essentially about two different fields, which may be very foreign to someone who was previously just a writer. And you have to have that willingness and that drive and that curiosity to jump in and figure all that stuff out.
Let me ask you this. There are plenty of people listening to this, whether they're in the filmmaking world, traditional filmmaking, turn on the Netflix, turn on the streamer, go to the film set. From there, you have people who, as many of my friends right now, I have several close friends who have gone back to get there, gone back to get their master's gone back to get their master's in psychology, in social work, in any number of fields, who might have hesitated in the past for the whole host of reasons that made perfect sense as to why they should not do that thing now. So I'm asking you, Rachel, for the people who are not quite sure when to make their vertical reach, how would you push them up a bit?
I think I would go back to that idea that the rules of traditional success are dying, if not dead, that we can try to look to models of the past about what constitutes success and stability. And because of the way that culture and technology and politics have shifted our lives, we're figuring it out as we go. Jobs that exist today didn't exist a year ago, including a lot of things in verticals specifically. So if right now you feel that based on your life experience in a life and a world that is constantly shifting. If the evidence that you are gathering is telling you to go in a new direction, don't let that sunk cost fallacy fool you and pursue the thing, obviously having thought it through and, but pursue that thing that you think is right. Because the only way to find out if a risk is worth taking sometimes is by taking it.
So let me ask you this, Rachel. As someone who's at the cutting edge, really setting the tone for the vertical industry, what is your next swipe up?
Very good question. So at Shorts, we've got a lot cooking. And we've been growing out our narrative team, and we've been experimenting with genres outside of the traditional romance tropes a bit. We're watching the industry and seeing how quality and experimentation has been increasing everywhere. Shows look better. They're written much more beautifully. Everything is just getting higher quality, and we not only want to make sure that we're keeping up, we want to make sure that we're still helping lead that charge, as you so kindly said. So we've started with genre experiments like Keep Your Ring, I'm President Now. We have recently also released a show that has some original music in it, and we're continuing, yes, The Sound of Us by Marta Chirego, which has been streaming for a little while now. It's very good. Highly recommend checking it out. But yeah, our big vertical move right now is figuring out what kind of stories can we tell next? Boundaries can we push that people will respond to and enjoy? And how can we keep this space fresh? How can we grow our team? How can we grow our production? And how can we make Shorts and our little corner of vertical storytelling bigger and better and more exciting? All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to close it out. And to my audience, remember, if you're building something new or becoming someone new, this is the vertical reach. And please keep swiping up. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Vertical Reach podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if it sparked something for you, please share it with a fellow storyteller. Until next time, let's tell stories that care.